The sensor grid went dark 3 seconds before the sky caught fire. Owen Hayes had been calibrating the moisture collectors when the emergency beacon started its urgent pulse against his wrist. He looked up from the dusty equipment panel, just in time to see something massive tear through the clouds above Verdant 7. The object screamed across the atmosphere, trailing debris and flame, spinning out of control as it arced toward the restricted terraforming zone. His work tablet automatically logged the crash coordinates: 2 kilometers northwest, deep in the valley where the corporate surveyors had marked off limits for unauthorized personnel. Owen grabbed his emergency pack and started running. Years of search and rescue training kicked in before his brain could process the decision. Something had gone down hard, and if anyone survived, they would need help fast. The terrain grew rougher as he pushed into the restricted area. Native vegetation grew thick here, pale blue leaves catching the afternoon light. In the distance, smoke rose in a dark column. Owen jumped over fallen logs and ducked under low branches, his breath coming hard in the humid air. Earth-standard gravity meant nothing slowed him down. The crash site made his stomach turn. Twisted metal lay scattered across 100 meters, still glowing red in places. The ship had torn a gash through the forest before breaking apart. Owen recognized the hull design from safety briefings. Drakari transport vessel. The Dragon people rarely came this far into human space. He moved carefully through the wreckage, checking for survivors. Most of the debris was too hot to approach. His scanner picked up residual radiation and chemical fires. The emergency beacon on his wrist pulsed faster as he got closer to the main fuselage section. That was when he heard it, a sound that made his chest tighten, crying, high-pitched and terrified, coming from somewhere in the twisted metal. Owen found the emergency pod wedged under a collapsed support beam. The transparent canopy had cracked but held. Inside, a small shape moved. He dropped to his knees and peered through the damaged surface. A dragonling stared back at him with wide golden eyes. She could not have been more than a toddler in Drakari years. Her scales flashed between deep purple and bright red, patterns Owen somehow understood meant fear and pain. One of her small wings bent at an angle that made him wince. The child pressed her clawed hands against the inside of the canopy and made desperate sounds. Words maybe, but in a language Owen did not speak. She was trapped and she knew it. Owen pulled tools from his emergency pack and started working on the pod's release mechanism. The metal had warped from impact. He had to be careful. One wrong move and the whole thing might collapse further. The dragonling watched his every movement, her scales pulsing with anxiety. It took 15 minutes to pry open the canopy. The little dragon flinched back when the seal finally broke. She tried to make herself smaller in the cramped space, whimpering in her alien tongue. Owen could see blood on her scales now. Her wing definitely looked broken and she had cuts along her arms. He held up his hand slowly, palms out. The universal gesture for peace that worked across most species. He spoke in a soft voice even though she would not understand the words. Sometimes tone mattered more than language. The dragonling's scales flickered uncertainly, purple fatting to blue, red shifting to orange. Owen reached into his pack very slowly and pulled out the medical kit. He opened it where she could see, showing her the supplies. Then he pointed at her injuries and to the bandages. She understood. After a long moment, she extended one small arm toward him. Owen worked as gently as he could. The dragonling hissed when he cleaned the cuts, but she did not pull away. Her scales felt warm under his fingers, like sun-heated stone. He splinted her wing using emergency supports from his kit and wrapped the worst of her wounds. She watched his face the entire time with those huge golden eyes. When he finished, she reached out and touched his cheek with one careful claw. Her scales had shifted to soft green and pale yellow now, better colors he hoped. Owen checked his scanner. The local predators would smell blood soon. They needed to move. He carefully lifted the dragonling from the pod. She weighed less than he expected, and she immediately grabbed onto his jacket with her good hand. Her small body trembled against his chest. He started back toward the colony as the sun dropped lower. The dragonling made soft sounds occasionally but mostly stayed quiet. Owen felt her grip tighten whenever he had to climb over obstacles. By the time his HAB unit came into view, full dark had fallen. The security sensors at the colony perimeter logged his return. Owen kept his head down and moved quickly to his door. His neighbors paid little attention. People kept to themselves here. That might buy him some time. Inside his small living space, Owen set the dragonling on the couch and turned on the lights. She blinked in the brightness and looked around the unfamiliar human environment. Her scales pulsed with confusion now. She made a questioning sound. Owen pulled out water and food synthesizer. He had no idea what Drakari children ate, but he could try. The dragonling watched as he worked. When he offered her the cup of water, she took it carefully in both hands and drank. She curled up on the couch afterward, exhausted and overwhelmed. Owen sat in the chair across from her and pulled up information on his tablet. The crash had been logged. Search teams would investigate tomorrow. Corporate security would ask questions. He looked at the small dragon child sleeping fitfully on his furniture. She twitched and whimpered in her sleep. Nightmares, probably. The poor thing had watched her family die. Owen made his decision then. He would protect her. Let the corporations and the bureaucrats wait. This child needed safety first. Everything else could come after. 3 days passed before the dragonling stopped flinching. Every time Owen moved too quickly. She had backed herself into the corner behind the entertainment unit that first morning when Owen came out of his bedroom. Her scales flashed aggressive warning patterns, and she hissed through tiny, sharp teeth. Owen had frozen in place and slowly sat down on the floor to make himself less threatening. It took an hour before she relaxed enough to accept breakfast. Owen pushed the plate across the floor and retreated to give her space. She grabbed the food and ate hunched over like something might steal it away. Her golden eyes never left him. By the second day, she would sit on the opposite end of the couch while Owen worked on his tablet. She watched everything he did with intense curiosity. Sometimes she made soft chirping sounds to herself. Owen noticed she seemed to understand when he spoke even if she could not answer in words he knew. The breakthrough came on day 3 when Owen accidentally knocked over a stack of repair manuals. The books crashed to the floor and Owen swore under his breath. He knelt down to gather them up. The dragonling appeared beside him and picked up one of the fallen books with her small clawed hands. She held it out to him carefully. When Owen took it and said thank you, her scales shifted to warm yellow. She made a trilling sound that might have been pleasure. Owen smiled at her. She tilted her head and her scales brightened further. Then she did something unexpected. She reached up and touched the side of Owen's face with one gentle claw, the same gesture she had made at the crash site. After that, things moved faster. She started following Owen around the HAB unit. When he ate, she wanted to eat. When he worked on equipment repairs, she sat nearby and watched. She tried to help sometimes, handing him tools even when she picked the wrong ones. Owen needed to communicate better with her. He pulled out an old translation device from his storage locker and spent hours trying to adapt it. The ship's universal translator had been damaged in the crash. This civilian model was not designed for Drakari language patterns, but Owen was good at making broken things work. The dragonling watched with fascination as he soldered circuits and reprogrammed the device. She pointed at components and made questioning sounds. Owen tried to explain what each part did. She seemed to understand more than he expected. When he finally got the translator working well enough for basic phrases, the first thing the dragonling said was a word that sounded like ash. She pointed at herself and repeated it. Ash. Owen pointed at himself and said his name clearly. She tried to copy the sounds and managed something close. They sat there on the floor teaching each other words for an hour. Colors, numbers. Simple objects around the room. Ash learned that the soft thing she slept on was called a couch. Owen learned that the color her scales turned when she felt happy was called something that translated roughly to sunrise. She taught him the Drakari words for hungry and tired and scared. That evening Owen made dinner and Ash sat at the table with him properly for the first time. She had trouble with human utensils but refused his help. She wanted to do it herself. Owen understood that need for independence. The translator helped, but it had limits. When Ash grew frustrated trying to describe something complex, her scales would flash irritated orange. Owen found that drawing pictures helped. Ash proved surprisingly talented with the digital sketch pad. She drew her family, two tall Drakari adults and herself much smaller between them. She drew the ship they had traveled on. Then she drew the attack, other ships firing weapons, explosions. Her small claw shook as she sketched the final image of her parents pushing her into the emergency pod. Owen did not need translation to understand. She had lost everything. He reached across and took her small hand carefully. Ash looked up at him with those huge golden eyes starting to shimmer with tears. She asked him something through the translator. The device struggled with the grammar, but Owen understood enough. She wanted to know if he was going to send her away, if she would have to leave. Owen squeezed her hand gently and shook his head no. He told her she could stay, that he would keep her safe. The translator probably mangled his words too, but Ash understood. Her scales went to the brightest yellow he had seen yet, and she threw her small arms around his neck. That night Owen tucked her into the couch with blankets and pillows. She had claimed that spot as her sleeping place. She looked so small curled up there, her injured wing still bound but healing well. As Owen turned to leave for his own room, Ash made a soft sound. He looked back. She had the translator clutched in one hand. She spoke a word in Drakari that the device processed slowly. Guardian. She was calling him guardian, the closest term in her language to what a parent would be. Owen felt his throat tighten. He had not expected to feel this way again after his own daughter grew up and left. But here was this small alien child looking at him with complete trust. He told her good night and she repeated the words carefully. Her eyes started to close almost immediately. She had felt safe enough to truly rest. Owen sat in his room afterward checking the local information networks on his tablet. Corporate security had investigated the crash site. They listed the crew as deceased with no survivors. The Drakari Empire had been notified, but showed no interest in sending recovery teams for a ship full of civilians. Ash had been declared dead along with her parents. That should have made Owen feel better. No one was looking for her, but it made him angry instead. Her own people had written her off without even checking properly. She was alone except for him. He looked at the notice about mandatory bioscans scheduled for the colony in 2 days. Security sweeps to check for unregistered life forms and contraband. Owen felt his jaw tighten. He needed help. He could not hide Ash alone. Rita found out because she always noticed when people acted nervous. Owen had worked with her for 5 years in colonial administration. She processed his work orders and equipment requests. She knew his routines. So when he showed up to file paperwork at odd hours and kept looking over his shoulder, Rita followed him home. She knocked on his door just after sunset. Owen opened it barely wide enough to see out. Rita pushed past him before he could protest. She stopped 3 steps into the HAB unit. Ash sat on the couch holding the translation device. Her scales had gone pale with fear. The 2 females stared at each other for a long moment. Rita turned to Owen with her eyebrows raised. She spoke in a carefully controlled voice. She asked him what exactly he thought he was doing hiding an unregistered alien child in his home. She used her administrator tone that made most colonists nervous. Ash's scales flashed between purple and red. She slipped off the couch and moved closer to Owen. Her small hand grabbed his pant leg. Owen put his hand on her shoulder protectively. He told Rita everything: the crash, finding Ash alone and injured, learning that no one was coming for her, making the choice to keep her safe. He spoke quickly, almost desperately. He explained that he knew it was against regulations, but he could not just hand her over to people who would treat her like property. Rita listened without interrupting. When Owen finished, she looked down at Ash again. The little dragon pressed against Owen's leg and stared back. Her scales had settled into anxious blue. Rita knelt down slowly to be at Ash's eye level. She asked through the translator if Owen had been treating her well, if she felt safe with him. Ash nodded and her scales shifted toward warmer colors. She told Rita that Owen was her guardian now. Rita stood up and pinched the bridge of her nose. She asked Owen if he understood how much trouble this could cause. The bioscan was in 2 days. Security would find Ash immediately. Corporate policy required reporting all unauthorized aliens for processing. Owen said he knew. He just needed more time to figure something out. Rita was quiet for a moment. Then she asked if Owen remembered that her son had died 6 years ago, an accident in the mining sector that corporate blamed on worker error. She had been fighting them ever since, but they had lawyers and resources she did not have. Owen said he remembered. He had been at the memorial service. Rita told him she would help. Not for him, for Ash, because no child should be left alone and afraid, because corporations treated people like numbers and she was tired of watching them win. The next day Rita brought forged travel documents. She had called in favors from 3 different departments to create a false identity. Ash was now listed as a visiting dependent from an off-world transport. The paperwork claimed she was waiting for connecting passage to continue her journey. It would not hold up under serious investigation, but it might fool a basic bioscan. Maybe. Owen's neighbor 2 doors down complicated things by catching Ash in the hallway. The man had come home early and found her examining the corridor plants with intense curiosity. Ash had frozen when she saw him. Her scales went ghost white. The neighbor was named Dimitri. He worked processing agricultural shipments. He looked at the small dragon in the hallway and then at Owen's open door. He could have reported them immediately. Instead, he crouched down and asked Ash in a gentle voice if she liked the plants. Ash nodded uncertainly. Dimitri told her they were from Earth originally, hardy species that grew anywhere. He reached out slowly and showed her how to feel the leaves without damaging them. Later that evening, Dimitri knocked on Owen's door. When Owen answered, expecting trouble, Dimitri just said he had a niece visiting too, from off-world, if anyone asked him. He understood how family could be complicated sometimes. Owen invited him in for coffee. Dimitri met Ash properly and let her show him drawings she had made on the sketch pad. He looked at the images of her family and the attack. He did not ask questions that would make her uncomfortable. He just told her he was sorry she had lost people she loved. Before Dimitri left, he told Owen about the bioscan procedures. He had worked security for a year before transferring to agricultural. He knew how the scanners worked. He explained that they looked for specific biological signatures. He suggested some equipment modifications that might help. The next morning, a woman from the science division appeared at Owen's door. Her name was Dr. Natalie Price. She taught xenobiology at the small research station attached to the colony. She had noticed unusual energy readings in this section of housing. Owen's heart sank when he opened the door and saw her official credentials. This was it. Someone had figured it out and now authorities were involved. Dr. Price asked politely if she could come inside. Owen had no good reason to refuse. He let her in and watched her eyes go immediately to Ash sitting on the couch. Ash stood up slowly. Her scales shifted through nervous patterns. She held the translator ready but said nothing. Dr. Price studied Ash with clear scientific interest. She asked how old Ash was in Drakari years. She noted the healing wing and asked about the injury. She walked around Ash slowly like examining a specimen. Owen felt anger rise in his chest. He told Dr. Price that if she planned to report them, she should just do it. He would not let Ash be treated like some lab experiment. Dr. Price stopped and looked at Owen with surprise. She said she had no intention of reporting them. She had come to offer help. She explained that several faculty at the research station had been discussing creating a sanctuary program for displaced alien miners. They had been trying to get approval for months, but corporate kept blocking the funding. She said if Owen was willing to participate, his guardianship of Ash could be the test case they needed. She could provide medical care and documentation. Academic protection had more weight than people realized. Owen did not trust it completely, but he had few options. He agreed cautiously. Dr. Price spent the next hour examining Ash's injuries and checking her overall health. She was professional but kind. She even made Ash laugh once. When Dr. Price left, she promised to return tomorrow before the bioscan. She would bring equipment to help hide Ash's signature. Owen watched her go and wondered if he had just made things better or worse. The bioscan team arrived at dawn, with enough equipment to search for contraband across the entire residential sector. Owen had been awake all night preparing. Dr. Price had brought a portable shielding unit that theoretically would mask Ash's biological signature. Theoretically. The doctor admitted she had never tested it on a Drakari child before. Ash sat very still in the specially modified compartment Owen had built into the storage closet. The space was lined with the shielding material. It had cost Owen most of his savings to acquire the components through unofficial channels. Ash wore a small breathing mask connected to external air supply. She could survive in there for several hours if needed. Before Owen closed the panel, Ash grabbed his hand. Her scales showed deep blue concern. She asked through the translator if he would come back for her, if he promised not to leave her hidden forever. Owen knelt down and took both her small hands in his. He promised he would never leave her, no matter what happened. He told her to be very quiet and very still, to pretend she was invisible. Ash nodded. She said she understood. She had hidden before during the attack on her ship. She knew how to be silent. Owen sealed the compartment and arranged storage containers in front to look natural. Then he sat on his couch and tried to appear calm when the security team knocked. 2 officers came in with scanning equipment. A third person followed them. Owen's stomach dropped when he recognized the man. Dr. Graham Ward from the Science Division. He was Dr. Price's supervisor, and he had a reputation for following regulations exactly. The officers swept through the small HAB unit methodically. Their scanners beeped and flashed as they checked for unauthorized technology and biological signatures. Owen forced himself to breathe normally. He answered their questions about his work schedule and equipment requisitions. Dr. Ward watched the proceedings with cold interest. He asked Owen if he had any recent visitors from off-world, any unusual contacts. Owen said no and hoped his voice stayed steady. The lead officer moved toward the storage closet. Her scanner started beeping more urgently. She frowned and adjusted settings. The beeping continued. She told her partner that she was getting strange readings. Owen felt sweat on his neck. The shielding was not working perfectly. They would find Ash. She would be taken away. Everything he had done would fail. Dr. Ward stepped forward and examined the scanner reading. He declared it was equipment malfunction. The electromagnetic interference from the terraforming grid caused false positives in this sector frequently. He had filed reports about it multiple times. The officer looked uncertain. She wanted to open the storage area anyway. Dr. Ward told her firmly that she was wasting time. He had work to do and this sweep was already behind schedule. He ordered them to move to the next unit. The security team left. Owen sat frozen on his couch, not believing what had just happened. Dr. Ward had lied for them. He had protected Ash. Owen waited 10 minutes before opening the compartment. Ash tumbled out gasping even though she had been breathing fine. She threw herself at Owen and wrapped her small arms around his neck. Her whole body shook. Owen held her and told her it was over. They were safe. No one was taking her away. Ash made soft, crying sounds against his shoulder. The translator had fallen during her scramble out of the hiding space. She did not need it to express relief. Later that afternoon, Dr. Ward returned alone. Owen answered the door ready to fight if necessary, but the older man just asked quietly if he could come in. Inside, Dr. Ward sat down heavily in a chair. He told Owen and Ash that he had lost his own daughter 10 years ago to genetic disease. She had been about Ash's age in human years. The medical technology existed to save her, but corporate insurance would not approve experimental treatment. Too expensive for a child with uncertain future productivity. Dr. Ward said he had followed every rule and regulation his entire career. It had not saved his daughter. It had not even let him try. He looked at Ash sitting close to Owen on the couch. He said Dr. Price had told him about the sanctuary program proposal, about Owen's situation. He had come to the bioscan planning to report them because rules were rules. Then he had seen Ash's hiding space through the scanner interference, seen the breathing apparatus and careful modifications, seen the desperate lengths Owen had gone to protect a child. Dr. Ward said he realized he had a choice: follow regulations that treated children like inventory, or do what his daughter would have wanted: help instead of harm. He told Owen that he was approving the sanctuary program effective immediately. Ash would be the first official participant. He would handle the paperwork and push it through before anyone could object. His position as division director gave him that authority. The cost would be his career probably. Corporate would not appreciate him bypassing their approval process, but Dr. Ward said some things mattered more than keeping a comfortable job. Ash understood enough to know Dr. Ward was helping them. She climbed off the couch and approached him carefully. She put one small clawed hand on his knee and looked up at him. Her scales showed gentle gold gratitude. Dr. Ward's eyes got wet. He put his hand over Ash's carefully. He told her in a rough voice that she should live a good life. Make it count. Over the next week, the community response surprised Owen. Dimitri spread word quietly among the other residents. People started stopping by with food and supplies. A teacher offered to tutor Ash in human language. A mechanic brought toys his own children had outgrown. Nobody reported them. The working-class colonists who had come to Verdant 7 looking for fresh starts understood protecting someone vulnerable. They had all needed help once. Rita made the sanctuary program official through administrative channels. She buried the approval in routine processing. By the time corporate noticed, Ash had legal temporary status as displaced minor under academic protection. Ash started venturing outside with Owen. People would smile and wave. Children wanted to meet her. She learned to play human games in the communal areas. Her scales stayed bright yellow most days. One evening, Owen watched Ash playing with 3 human children in the corridor. They were teaching her a clapping game. She kept messing up the rhythm and laughing. Her injured wing had healed well enough that she could fold it properly now. Rita stood beside Owen watching the same scene. She said that humans had survived Earth by learning to protect each other, by expanding their definition of family to include whoever needed it. Maybe that made them weak by some species standards. Owen said it made them human. That was enough. The Drakari warship appeared in orbit 6 weeks after the crash, with enough firepower to level the colony twice over. Owen got the alert while working on moisture collectors in the agricultural sector. All colonial personnel were ordered to report to the main landing platform. A diplomatic delegation required immediate assembly. He ran back to his HAB unit where Rita was watching Ash. Ash knew. Somehow she knew before anyone told her. Her scales had gone completely white. She stood at the window staring up at the sky even though the ship was not visible from ground level. She spoke one word through the translator: Empire. Rita looked at Owen with fear in her eyes. She asked what they should do. Owen had no answer. The Drakari Empire had jurisdiction over their own citizens. If they demanded Ash's return, human colony law could not stop them. Dr. Ward arrived within minutes. He brought documentation and legal files. He said they had one chance. Galactic law allowed custody hearings for displaced minors if the guardian could prove the child's well-being would be harmed by removal. It rarely worked, but it was possible. The delegation came down in a transport that made the ground shake when it landed. Owen stood in the greeting area with Ash beside him. She held his hand so tight her small claws dug into his palm. Colonial administrators flanked them looking nervous. The Drakari who emerged from the ship made Ash look tiny by comparison. They stood 3 meters tall with scales like polished armor. Their wings spread wide enough to cast shadows over half the platform. At their center walked one who wore markers of high rank. Ambassador Corvin. His scales were deep crimson and black. Scars marked his face and arms. He looked at the assembled humans with barely concealed contempt. When his eyes found Ash, his expression became unreadable. He spoke in the Drakari language. A translator device rendered his words into human speech. He stated that he had come to retrieve the survivor of the transport vessel. The child would return to the Empire for proper raising among her own kind. Owen felt Ash trembling. He stepped forward and spoke clearly. He said that Ash was under his legal guardianship as approved by colonial authorities. He formally requested a custody hearing under Galactic Minor Protection Statutes. Corvin looked at Owen like he was an insect making noise. He said that human custody of a Drakari was absurd. The child belonged with her species. This discussion was pointless. Dr. Ward stepped forward and presented the official documentation. He cited specific galactic codes and precedents. He stated that the law required a hearing regardless of species preferences. The human colony recognized those laws and demanded they be honored. Corvin's scales darkened with anger, but he could not simply ignore established galactic protocols. The Drakari Empire claimed to be civilized. They followed laws even when dealing with lesser species. He agreed to the hearing but made clear he considered it a waste of time. The hearing took place 2 days later in the Colonial Administrative Building. A neutral arbiter arrived via commercial transport, a Zentari judge who specialized in cross-species legal disputes. Her insectoid features made her expressions hard to read, but her reputation for fairness was known across multiple systems. Corvin presented his case first. He described Drakari culture and tradition, the importance of raising children to understand their heritage and honor their bloodlines. He explained that Ash needed to learn the ways of her people, to speak her language properly and know her history. He added that orphaned children in the Empire were given to established houses to raise. Ash would be cared for. She would have a place in society, better than living as an oddity among aliens. Owen noticed Corvin did not mention that orphans became servants in those houses, that they were marked as lesser from birth. Rita had researched Drakari's social structure thoroughly. She had shown Owen the documented evidence of how they treated children without living parents. When Owen's turn came, he approached the judge's bench with Ash beside him. He did not use fancy legal language. He just told the truth. He described finding Ash terrified and alone, her injuries, her nightmares. He talked about teaching her to feel safe again, about watching her learn to trust. He showed recordings of her progress over the past weeks, her playing with human children, her learning and growing. He asked Corvin directly if orphans in the Empire received the same treatment as children with parents, if Ash would be raised as an equal or as a servant. Corvin did not answer. Dr. Price testified about Ash's psychological health. She presented data showing the child was thriving in human care. She noted that removing her now would cause significant trauma. She stated professionally that Ash's best interests were with Owen. Dr. Ward testified about the Sanctuary program and its goals. He described the community support Ash received. He challenged the Empire to show evidence they would provide equal or better care. Then the judge asked to speak with Ash alone. Owen did not want to let her go, but he had no choice. Ash walked to the private chamber with her scales flickering anxious blue. She looked back at Owen once before the door closed. 20 minutes passed. Owen could barely breathe. Rita sat beside him, gripping his arm. Dr. Ward watched the closed door like he could see through it. When Ash emerged, her scales showed colors Owen had never seen before. Determined orange mixed with defiant red. She walked straight back to Owen and took his hand. The judge returned to her position. She announced she had made her decision. She had asked Ash about her life with Owen and her thoughts about returning to the Empire. She had evaluated the testimony and evidence from both sides. The judge stated that Ash's welfare was the primary concern in any custody decision. She had determined that Ash expressed clear preference for remaining with her current guardian. The child showed no signs of abuse or neglect. The human community had demonstrated adequate resources and willingness to support her development. The judge ruled in Owen's favor. Provisional custody granted with requirement for regular welfare checks. Ash would remain with Owen Hayes. Corvin stood abruptly. His scales flashed rage. He said this was an insult to the Drakari Empire, that the judge had no right to give a Drakari child to humans. He could appeal to higher galactic authority. He could demand imperial review. The judge stated calmly that he had that right, but the ruling stood until overturned through proper channels. She dismissed the hearing. Corvin looked at Ash one more time. Something complicated crossed his scarred face. Then he turned and left without another word. Corvin returned 3 hours after the ruling, without his diplomatic entourage. Owen answered the door of his HAB unit to find the massive Drakari warrior standing alone in the corridor. Several neighbors had noticed and were watching nervously from their doorways. Corvin's scales showed neutral gray. His wings were folded tight against his back. He asked if he could enter. Owen hesitated but stepped aside. Corvin had to duck to fit through the human-sized doorway. He looked absurdly large in the small living space. Ash was at the table drawing. She looked up and her scales went pale with fear. She moved closer to Owen immediately. Corvin stood in the center of the room and removed his ceremonial armor piece by piece. Underneath, he wore simple cloth. His scales showed scars that spoke of a violent life. He sat down heavily on the floor to be less imposing. He looked at Ash and spoke in their shared language. The translator picked up his words slowly. He told her he needed to explain something he should have said at the hearing. Corvin revealed that he too had been orphaned as a hatchling. His parents died in a border conflict when he was barely older than Ash was now. He had been given to a great house as tradition required. He became their property, their servant. He described growing up knowing he would never be equal to children born into families. He was fed and sheltered, but never loved. He fought in the military because it was the only path for someone with his status to gain any respect. He earned his rank through blood and scars. Corvin looked at Owen. He said he had come to Verdant 7 expecting to find a damaged hatchling barely surviving. He had planned to take Ash back because it was proper, because Drakari children belonged with Drakari. But he had watched the hearing recordings afterward. He saw Ash playing with human children, laughing, her scales bright with happiness. He saw the community that protected her. He heard Owen speak about her with genuine love. Corvin admitted that he had never experienced what Ash had found here. No one had fought for him the way these humans fought for her. He had lived his entire life believing strength meant dominance and tradition, that accepting anything less was weakness. He looked at his scarred hands. He said he had become powerful in the Empire. He commanded respect through fear and reputation. But he was alone. He had no family, no one who cared if he lived or died beyond his military value. Ash watched Corvin with wide eyes. She asked through the translator why he was telling her this. Corvin's scales shifted to deep blue sadness. He told her that he would not appeal the ruling. He would return to the Empire and report that the human guardian was adequate. He would use his influence to prevent others from challenging the decision. Ash could stay. But he made a request. He asked if he could be listed as her sponsor in the Imperial records. It was a traditional role that carried some legal weight. It would give her status in Drakari society if she ever needed it. It would mark her as protected by a high-ranking warrior. It would also give Corvin something he never had, a connection to family even if not by blood, someone to care about beyond duty. Owen looked at Ash. The decision was hers. Ash studied Corvin for a long moment. Then she asked him if he would visit sometimes, if he would teach her about her people properly, not as a servant but as someone worthy of knowledge. Corvin's scales flickered with surprise and something that might have been hope. He said he would. He promised to return when his duties allowed and to bring records of her family, to help her understand where she came from while she built where she was going. Ash nodded slowly. She accepted his offer. Corvin placed his hand over his heart in formal gesture. He said he would honor this bond. Before Corvin left, Owen stopped him at the door. He said he had misjudged the ambassador. He thanked him for making this choice. Corvin looked at Owen with his scarred face. He said that humans had taught him something the Empire never did. That strength included knowing when to let go. Months passed. Ash's official adoption processed through proper channels with Corvin's sponsorship, removing any imperial objections. She became Ash Hayes in all legal records. She learned to write her name in both human letters and Drakari symbols. Corvin visited twice during that time. He brought artifacts from Ash's family and taught her traditional songs, but he also sat at Owen's table and shared meals. He watched Ash play with human friends and nodded approval at her happiness. The sanctuary program expanded. Other displaced alien children found their way to Verdant 7. The colony gained reputation as a safe place for those who did not fit elsewhere, humans welcoming the lost and the different. Owen's daughter came from Earth to meet Ash. The two of them bonded immediately despite having nothing in common biologically. They became sisters through choice and love. The daughter taught Ash human music and Ash taught her Drakari games. A year after the crash, Owen sat on his couch watching Ash help younger children at the community center. She translated for a shy alien child struggling to communicate. Her scales showed patient green as she worked. Rita sat beside Owen. She commented that humans had a strange talent for building families from spare parts, for taking in strays and making them belong. Other species conquered territory. Humans collected people. Owen smiled. He said maybe that was humanity's real strength, not weapons or technology, just the stubborn insistence that everyone deserved someone who cared, that being alone was the worst thing you could let happen to anyone. Ash looked over and saw Owen watching. Her scales flashed bright yellow. She waved at him with the universal gesture of love. Owen waved back. She had found more than rescue in human arms. She had found home, and in finding it, she had shown a proud warrior empire that their way was not the only way. That strength came in forms they had never considered. The galaxy was starting to learn that humanity's greatest weapon was not their death-world resilience or their technology. It was their absolute refusal to leave anyone behind, their compulsion to protect the vulnerable even when it cost them everything. In Drakari tradition, orphans were broken. In human hands, they were simply children who needed family. That difference would reshape more than one life. It would eventually reshape how species saw each other across the stars. But that was future. For now, there was just a small dragon child teaching patience to others because someone had been patient with her. There was just Owen watching his daughter help someone else's child because that was what family did. The arms that held worlds were not made of weapons. They were made of this simple choice to care when it would be easier not to. Human arms opened wide enough to catch anyone falling, even those who fell from the stars.